Yasses, folks. I'm just checking up on my big Moluccas. And what I've done here now is I've just put a little bit of liquid gold in the 1 litre. It's very little, not even 5 mil, probably about 2 or 3 mil. And I just noticed that they don't need to be hydrated. Please ignore the writing there. That was a green oak lettuce that we had there from our seedling grower. But we're not doing that at the moment. We've got big Moluccas in here and you can see the moisture's in there. This is my little makeshift hothouse because I still haven't built my big one that I want. I'll get to it one day, hopefully before my 60th. Nevertheless, this has actually got a lot of warmth in here because of the Perspex. In the past, I've used bubble wrap around it because the air pocket in the bubble wrap acts like an insulator and reduces, it's like double glazing, and it reduces the cold air getting in and obviously captures the hot air in the cool months and keeps it cool in the warmer months. So this now is warm enough for now. I might end up bubble wrapping. I haven't put a heat mat on there. I've got them all down here. You can see I've got all sorts of things going on in here. So this heat mat will go on under here so I can keep the temperature of the soil or the medium at an optimal level, so around 17 degrees, 18 degrees. You can go higher, but that's too hot. It'll dry out too quickly. And I haven't got a little hothouse over the top because this is a larger tray than usual for my typical hothouses that I use. So the seedling tray or heat mat will be there to keep it warm at night, but at the moment, as I feel it, there is a lot of warmth because of the plastic and the thickness of this seedling tray that we're using. Not available for you guys. And as far as the plugs, because that's where the plugs are grown in, well, we're talking to the growers and hopefully we'll have them back online for you guys to be able to order them or go to your local garden centre. But more importantly, let's talk about seedlings. What I've got here are seedlings from Van Loon's nursery in Geelong or Wellington. I'm not sure, I think it's Wellington, but anyway, you'll look them up and if you want to go there. Fantastic garden centre, by the way, as all independent garden centres should be. These are Pertul seedlings, and they're a grower that we carried in our range of seedlings when we had the garden centre once upon a time as a retail store. Now, I've picked the biggest ones that I could find there, but there are times, and it's not specific to Pertul, it's all seedling growers, no matter where you go, you'll find sometimes the seedlings are a little bit undersized on the shelf there, and you want to get them out into the garden pretty quick. Things you've got to watch out for with seedlings are that if they've grown under controlled environment, like under plastic or in a hothouse environment because the weather's either too cold or even sometimes too hot, these seedlings will be soft. Soft in the sense that they're not hardened off for the environment taking them home. Now, these were under a little bit of plastic, be it all the ceiling height or the roof line was quite high, so there was plenty of airflow underneath there, so they're not completely soft, and you can tell they're not soft, they're not limp or wimp. The onions here that I've got here are a little bit undersized, so something like this you would not be planting out into the garden straight away, and in fact, you'd probably leave them in here and take the tops off, as I'm going to do now, just to push a bit of energy back down to the root system so it can form up and thicken off a little bit. So just a trim like that is what they need, and that'll encourage more root development or just energy back into the base. And then hopefully as they thicken up in the next couple of weeks, we'll transplant them out into the garden because they are a little bit weak in that respect. Lettuce as well. So this is an iceberg lettuce that I have here. And even though it's grown nicely and strong on top, you can see that, but if I wobble it around, you'll see it's quite weak at the base. It's almost as if it's stretched a bit at the beginning, and there are a few there together. So if I was to separate these at this very moment, as good as they look on top, they are still a little bit soft. So these would need ideally 1 to 2 weeks sitting in the veggie garden, for example out here, maybe not on this bench top because this will reflect a little bit of heat and dry them out too quickly, but actually in the veggie garden out here. If you're planning to put some in here, which is what I'm planning to do, plant between my brassicas and fill in the gaps that the bloody birds have taken out the seedlings on, sit these seedlings out there. The kale's strong, you don't have to worry about that. The spinach, just a little bit undersized because its juvenile leaves are there. It's just pushed on its first adult leaves, as I call them, and you can see the base is very, very weak at the moment. So the root system, let's have a look at that. Sorry for moving it around too fast, but let's have a look at the roots. It may be that they've got a decent root ball, although we've got a lot of this stuff falling out. It looks like fish food, doesn't it? So we've got a decent root ball going on underneath there, so they've had some warm environments. To separate these, you've got to normally halve them in the middle. Now you can do this underwater so you don't tear the roots, or just wiggle them carefully because this bottom half here, regardless, if I put this in water, yeah, I'll be able to separate it, but look at this. That's too long. A little bit of a trim's not going to hurt these little beauties, but again, they are a little bit undersized for my liking. Look at these long roots on these. All right, so let me just pull these apart and I'll show you what I mean by undersized. If I can just carefully, yeah, look, I'm just going to be a little bit more aggressive now. So when you start pulling these apart, this is what you end up with. That's tiny. That's way too small to go into the garden. And especially that there, you'll find a couple of half decent ones, but mostly are a little bit small. Now, you can transplant them into a larger pot rather than just keeping them in the same punnet, right? So they can grow on a little bit. But more importantly is hardening them off. Now, that's got to go somewhere. I'll stick it in the ground in a minute, even though it is small. They need to harden off, folks. So hardening off your seedlings, especially if you're buying something that's a little bit out of season, because tomatoes are out at the moment. By no stretch of the imagination should you be planting them in the ground unless you've got a hothouse built around them and controlled environment, so you've got some heating elements going on in there to keep the warmth in there. Unless they've self-germinated, and if you've got any of those in your garden, by all means, knock yourself out. If you can get them to grow, and I've seen some of you guys posting some videos in response to some early season plantings showing some tomatoes that still haven't stopped. And in fact, I've got one straight across there in the raised bed there next to the salvia that's still pushing on. It's got flowers and tiny little fruit, and I dare say it's going to be one of the cherry varieties because they're the most active plants throughout the year. And again, back to the topic of seedlings, when you buy them from your local garden centre, ideally I recommend you service your own by germinating your own in your garden so they become your own babies, and collect as much seed as you can. But as you can see here, I like topping it up now and then with varieties that I get from the local garden centres. And when I say they're undersized, and I mean undersized in the sense that they haven't hardened off of your garden and the root ball's still just developing on it, or the root system's developing on it. But that's not a bad thing. In fact, it's got a longer shelf life for the garden centre, and if they've got an outdoor environment, they harden off really well. But if you're going to your local garden centre, and most of you have been visiting them for years, if not, decades, you know exactly what they supply you, you know the environment that they're grown in, and you know what your climate's like, your microclimate's like, and you know how well they perform. And if you find that you've picked up a seedling from a local garden centre, and I'm not referring to Perth Hills, it can be any of the growers, and you found when you took it home it went limp quite quickly, that means it's been kept in a controlled environment. And if they've had to grow them on so they can supply for the demand that's been created, that's what they'll do. They'll bring them on a little bit quicker because they have controlled environments. Otherwise, you're not going to get your tomatoes early in the season like they are now available at your garden centre. So don't think you can pick up a seedling that's out of season, go home and plant it smack into the garden and expect it to survive, unless you've got the exact same microclimate as where they've come from. So harden your plants off by keeping them out in the veggie garden. And sometimes you may need to do it in increments. And what I mean by that is take the seedling out on a nice day like today. It's not too windy. Sit it out in the garden as I've done there. As soon as the weather turns, it may be out there for 3 or 4 hours at the heat of the day where the sun's shining on it. Fantastic. As soon as it goes into shade, bring it back in under cover somewhere where it's protected. Maybe in a little hothouse overnight. Next morning, take it out, leave it out there for a little bit longer. 5 hours or 6 hours. So increment exposure to the microclimate to harden it off is what you need to do. That's if you've got a really harsh environment like I have. Otherwise, risk it, stick it in the ground, and if it grows, good luck. If it doesn't, go back and buy another one. That's what the garden centres are there for, to look after you and to give you produce. Better yet, get on our website, vasili'sgarden.com, and get yourself some seeds, which are really cheap at the moment. Use the coupon code 30OFF to get them just on $2 delivered to your house. Bigger discounts on multi-packs as well. So it's all at vasili'sgarden.com, and if you want to learn more about preparing your garden for springtime, go to our workshop page and book yourself in for one of the workshop sections that we're having, and you'll be out here with me preparing some garden beds, filling up some raised beds, and learning all about soil and texture, composting and humus, and what makes a good garden thrive. From me, Vasili, Maresi, see you soon.